Well, the coalition is a nonpartisan, statewide pro-voter coalition of grassroots networks, civil rights and civil liberties organizations, reentry communities, good government groups, unions, social services providers, immigrant rights groups, and everyday citizens that are fighting to improve our elections by making registering and voting more accessible and equitable for every eligible New Yorker. The coalition grew out of a series of rallies that were held in New York City to call for adoption of early voting in New York, organized by Common Cause New York, SEIU 32BJ, and activists from the Brooklyn Voters Alliance. So we've been around since 2017 to bring election and voting rights reform front and center in New York while updating New York's election law up to 21st century standards, to ensure that New Yorkers have more time to vote, an easier time voting, and modern voter registration systems. Since then, we've been able to pass several legislative bills that makes voting much accessible, much easier, including early voting. We've also been able, as you can see on the screen, these various bills like online voting registration, pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds, Golden Day, which is the only time when folks can register on the last day of registration, but also participate in early voting. So it's kind of similar to like same-day registration, as well as voting by mail. But our election system overall is still not perfect. It's far from perfect. So we are waging various campaigns in 2025 to make voting much more accessible, specifically to communities of color, specifically for the youth, and specifically for those that are incarcerated in jails. But just to also give you a little bit of a wide scope of the coalition, these are the several organizations, as I had highlighted in the beginning, that are part of Let New York Vote. Several grassroots organizations, several big organizations like the NAACP. We also have unions like SEIU 32BJ that I had mentioned earlier, UAW, and several nonprofit organizations as well too. I mentioned Common Cause to be one of them, the Brennan Center of Law, and various others. So we spanned across the 5 boroughs. Also, we have organizations in upstate New York, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, and other areas. But we really want to talk about the various legislative bills that we're campaigning right now. So one of them is the even-numbered elections, even-numbered years. So moving local elections to happen in even-numbered years, because the problem is, odd year election calendar usually depresses voter turnout. Everyone is all up and excited about the general federal election, national election, but the year after is always the local elections, and we don't get as many people to attend to those elections and participate. So it's not representative of the population as a whole. So the solution to that would be to move local elections to happen at the same time as the general national elections. There have been case studies in various other cities where voter turnout increase for local elections when they happen on even numbered years to coincide with the national elections. There's definitely a reduction in gap of participation. There is also, it helps with pro-democracy election timing reforms that's enacted by the legislature. So looking at the studies on this graphic here, cities like Los Angeles, Phoenix, Austin, San Francisco, Baltimore have seen tremendous boosts of turnout when in participating in local elections when it coincides with the year of the national elections. So currently, so we have that for even numbered years. The second campaign that we're also focusing on is increasing the youth vote, specifically on college campuses. This year in New York, we saw turnout decline, or actually in 2024, I should say. And specifically in New York State, it really lagged behind the national average. The problems that persist as far as getting youth to come out to polling sites is, a lot of them, those that are in college, there seems to be a lack of information that is relayed to them about the election process or the candidates. Um, there's also these structural, informational, motivational barriers that continue to persist, meaning that college campuses do not make it a priority to educate students and inform them about civic engagement and about voting. So our solution to that is the Student Voter Empowerment Act, which would require college campuses to have student voting coordinators to develop and implement a action plan of at least 3 civic events year round to cater to the students and provide them with nonpartisan election related information through different mediums, through social media, through public events in person, etc. But what's really key here is it's an opportunity for the student voting coordinators to work directly with the Board of Elections to standardize best practices that will increase voter registration and possibly also vote on polling or to have polling sites on their universities, pending the number of students that are registered to vote on site. Third, our third bill that we're focused on is really giving voting rights, for more so voting accessibility to those that are incarcerated in jails, but do not have access to vote. They have the right to vote, but they don't have access to vote because the Board of Elections is not involved in implementing the structure in place that would allow them to submit absentee ballots. So this bill would resolve that issue altogether, providing more funding to the Board of Elections to ensure that they have the structure in place to coordinate with the jails themselves. But it'll also allow the opportunity for community organizations, community-based organizations to work directly with the Board of Elections to help in that process of ensuring that those that are incarcerated in jails that have the right to vote are able to submit absentee ballots. And we've seen this actually be successful in some of our towns upstate. I think Oak Rick was one example in which the elections commissioners were able to coordinate and go to the local jail to register or not register to help those that were in jail to submit and fill out absentee ballots. We're also looking, the Board of Elections is not perfect, unfortunately. It is underfunded, it is overworked. There are irregularities as far as the hierarchy and the system at play. So we have a package of various bills that would reform the Board of Elections to, one, compensate those that are working on the Board of Elections so that they can be much more effective to be able to carry out their jobs. We have a package of bills. So these bills that I'm highlighting here as part of that package, we're very close, actually passed through the Senate, but we really need the support of our members in the coalition and our supporters of the coalition to help make some movement through the assembly side. One of them is the requiring election commissioners to complete a uniform training within 6 months of appointment. So obviously we want our election commissioners to be competent to be able to fulfill their roles so that they can provide better and efficient service to the voters, as well as another bill that focuses on making commissioners full-time employees of a local board of elections outside of New York City because that is not the case. They are not properly funded or, they're, as I mentioned before, not being compensated for the work that they do. So this bill would obviously resolve that issue. And there's a couple more, at least an additional 8 other bills that would modernize election administration, make it much more efficient. I didn't highlight it here because these are the 2 bills that have the most promise to really pass through legislation this year in 2025. Other bills that we're also focused on trying to get passed includes authorizing New York State to join the Electronic Registration Information Center. This is basically would clean out voter rolls to make sure they're most up to date. So those that are registered can vote, and those that are not or were formerly registered do not have or no longer reside in states or prefer to not to take part in New York State elections, don't have to vote. And then we also have another bill that's focused on extending the operations of a polling site in case that there is a disruption at the polling site. Specifically where there's an emergency or significant delay to voting that lasts more than 15 minutes consecutively. So this would require bipartisan election officials to automatically extend the time for balloting for the time lost at impacted polling sites. And then we have a couple other bills that we're also working on in addition to those priorities. We have this voter challenge protection bill, which would require persons that challenge the validity of voter applicants to provide their identification information and written documentation to the challenger. We've had cases specifically last year when a poll site monitor tried to, or actually not a poll site monitor, but claims to be tried to challenge a voter who was a student to submit a ballot at their polling site, at their assigned polling site. So this would create the barrier for anyone that is trying to challenge someone that has the validity to vote to be able to vote. Other priorities that we're also focused on requires changing the New York State Constitution, which is a bit more of a challenge per se. But you know, there is some support behind some of these changes to the Constitution. For example, we are looking to expand same-day voter registration to every day of in-person voting. And then the second point that we also want to change in the New York State Constitution would give those that are incarcerated voting rights or restoration, I'm sorry, restoration of voting rights to those that are currently incarcerated in New York. And the last two that I also want to highlight is that we're also working on trying to get bills passed that would require better notice to voters before registration cancellation or before they put on inactive status. So like, yeah, a reminder that if something is before their voting accessibility changes, there would be that communication to the voter, as well as give options to voters who do not have a preference for electronic ballots, so or submitting them electronically. So we also want to we are supporting these bills that give the option to have paper ballots for submission. And yeah, the coalition is pretty well structured. We meet bi-weekly on Wednesdays at noon. The various bills that I had talked about have different working groups. So the Student Voter Empowerment Act has a youth working group. The election administration package that's being worked on is the focus of the Board of Elections Reform Working Group. The group that's focused on Democracy During Detention Act that would give accessibility of voting to those that are incarcerated that have the right to vote. That's under the Free to Vote New York. And then we also have moving local elections to even numbered years, handled by the Even Year Elections Working Group. So this is an opportunity for those that are interested to get involved with our work. You have the option to like join any one of the working groups. But yeah, to really be part of the coalition is an opportunity to work with different organizations across New York State on these particular bills that I just highlighted. And having your support in that would definitely move several of our lawmakers to make sure that these bills go to the floor for a vote before the end of the legislative session. But yeah, I mean, I just came from a legislative staffer briefing in Albany a couple hours ago. It was really fruitful meeting with some lawmakers showed up, like Senator Gonzalez, Assemblywoman Assemblywoman Casse, um, We also had Senator May, who came to listen to several of the bills that we were highlighting, and we had several legislative directors as well too, because they are the ears and feeders of communication to inform their lawmaker about the work that we are conducting here. But we plan to do some advocacy around our bills for the next couple months. At our next coalition call on March 26th, we're planning to do a phone banking, email bank event where we will reach out to lawmakers to co-sponsor these bills if they haven't co-sponsored it already. And then we also have a advocacy day in Albany. So several of us within the coalition will be up in Albany on Tuesday, April 29th, which is another opportunity to meet with lawmakers and work with different organizations and individuals who are passionate about, reforming the voting process for the better, to ensure that every New Yorker has equitable and equal rights to be able to register to vote and to also take part in voting in itself. So I'm not sure what Joe has shared. I know Joe has shared the legislative priorities bill that kind of went over on several of these slides to several folks within your coalition, at least leadership from what I've been told. And then there were also one-pagers on some of the priorities that I just spoke of just now. So I am opening the floor up to any sort of questions or comments if folks have any about some of the bills that we're working on, or questions about the coalition itself. Susan.
I've been attending the Suffolk County Legislature on issues relating to immigration. And while I was there was a very organized group of people coming every meeting against the new voting machines that Suffolk County wants to order. And they've been attacking them as being too expensive. And, I'm not quite sure what's going on, if this is who these people are and what their gripe is, but they've been showing up every meeting with all kinds of facts and figures and statistics about these voting machines, that they're cheaper ones in other places and they're not reliable, and it's proven they're not reliable. Do you know anything about these voting machines that have been ordered by Suffolk County? Would you be able to find out about them to see, you know, I just worry out here because of Suffolk County, if you know Suffolk County, that this is some sort of extreme right wing group that wants to somehow use this to cut the number of people that can vote. I mean, I'm sorry, I have a lack of trust, but I'm not really sure because they're there every meeting raising this question about the voting machines.
That's a very good question. I know one of the bills that I had just highlighted would focus on creating much more efficient voting machines. And again, given the option too of using accurate paper ballots. It's the Protect Our Ballots bill, which I mentioned as part of our priorities. You don't recall the name of the organization, do you?
No, I don't. But what would be interesting is if you could find out evidently these voting machines cost millions and millions of dollars. If you could check maybe with the Suffolk County Board of Elections and find out what the name of the voting machines are that they're ordering. And if they're good voting machines, these people shouldn't be arguing it against them. It may just be that they want less efficient voting machines in the hopes that they're easier to, whatever, to hack or to stop people from using them. I don't know. It's just they're there every single meeting complaining about these voting machines.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, we have several members, or very few actually,
Hey, Lily,
organizations in Suffolk County, so we can definitely
Lily,
look into that. But someone was talking. Go for it.
Lily, it's Joe.
Hey,
So
Joe.
Susan, hey, so this is that group is probably with Lulu Freestad, who works on voting machines, and pretty much this is a fully electronic voting machine, I think, that they're trying to purchase into Suffolk County, which means there'll be no more paper ballot. What you end up is with a receipt, which not a lot of people are not happy about that, because you would sort of scan your ballot in, and well, not scan, I'm sorry, you choose your ballot on the screen, and then a barcode would come out, and then it would scan a barcode, and then that would be your vote casted. It's really expensive. It doesn't seem to be that secure. And
That was
so
their main
I'll
complaint,
I'll
the
forward you an
expense.
email about it, you know. It's something that multiple BOEs throughout the state are looking to do. I'm not personally, I'm not comfortable with that. I want a paper ballot. I think that's the best backup you can have to count how many votes really did happen that day. So, I'll get you information on it.
Thank you very much, Joe.
No problem.
Thank you, Joe. I see a hand up, Carrie.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I had two questions. First of all, thank you so much for the work that you guys have been doing. I'm a disabled voter, and obviously I'm very concerned about making sure that my vote is cast in every election. I always vote in person. I love being able to vote early, and I'm sure you guys had a hand in that. So I really appreciate that. And I first wanted to know if you had a working group for voters with disabilities, because obviously there is still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially when it comes to informing people of the availability of the accessible ballot marking devices, and training the poll workers on how to use them. And my second question was, has there been any movement on opening up the primaries, particularly the Democratic ones, to people who choose not to be part of the Democratic Party for whatever reason, but still would like to vote for them? I know that was something that was a big issue during the 2016 campaign. And I know there are a lot of people that might not want to register with the party for whatever reason, but still want to be able to choose which Democrat is going to be running for whatever office.
That's a good question. So first, the response to your first one, we don't have a working group that's focused on the disabled vote. We have one or two organizations that identify as disabled vote organizations, but like waging campaigns on those to fight for disability rights, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we would be interested to definitely form one if there is support around it, and individuals and organizations that would be interested in waging that campaign. So I would recommend you definitely check out our next coalition meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I can also connect you with some organizations. I forget, the name is Independent Center of the
Oh,
Living.
yeah, it's probably one of the independent living centers.
Yeah, so two of their organizations are part of the Let New York Vote coalition. I think they're outside of New York City, though, from what I understand. But yeah, I would definitely recommend to come check out the next coalition meeting, and
Okay.
actually, if maybe also voice that opinion, voice that interest, because there are others out there that would also be interested in forming a working group focused on disability rights, voting
Mm-hmm.
rights. For your last question, so we are, as I mentioned, we are nonpartisan.
Right.
So that's a bit of a tricky
Yeah, I know, it's a little
tightrope. We are also well, I think we identify as kind of like a 501(c)(3) organization.
Yeah, so you probably can't get involved in that kind of stuff.
No, unfortunately not.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I mentioned, we're like nonpartisan as a coalition.
Right.
Yeah, and our focus again is to open up accessibility to vote regardless of party affiliation.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Just good to know.
But yeah, I mean, I will leave my contact information with Joe. And if yeah, I mean, if anyone is interested to check out the next coalition meeting, let New York vote at gmail.com, let NY vote at gmail.com. You can always communicate with me there, and I can send you information to partake in the coalition meetings. Hannah?
Getting off mute here. Oh, hi. Thanks. Two questions. What do you think of ranked choice voting? And also, there's some federal bill in the House regarding, and I don't even know the detail, if maybe you know it, something about people who change their name when they get married having trouble registering or something. Have you heard about that?
That's a
Yes.
SAVE Act.
Is it called the SAVE Act? Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one.
So
Is that
ranked
going to
choice,
affect what you're
yeah,
doing?
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's federal, so I mean, it affects everyone in general. I mean, the SAVE Act, I believe, would only allow those with a birth certificate or or those with a passport to show their identification and eligibility to match with who they are to be able to register to vote or change their vote. So yeah, the coalition, well, it's not specifically we as a coalition haven't necessarily adopted like a campaign to push back against the SAVE Act, but several organizations within the coalition, including my very own New York Civic Engagement Table, have been campaigning to um, demand that lawmakers reject the SAVE Act because it's going to affect millions of voters, not immigrants, women, various populations in the rural communities. So we definitely have a huge stance of ensuring that the SAVE Act gets rejected. From what I understand, it was supposed to go for a vote on the floor this last month, February, but I think that has been pushed back against that. And then for ranked choice voting, well, we haven't necessarily as a coalition partake in because I understand they're more local. I know New York City has ranked choice voting, but there are several counties that are that is up on the ballots actually this year to push for ranked choice voting. I'm not particularly sure where the coalition stands in that regard. But members of the coalition are in favor of ranked choice voting. Actually, we utilize ranked choice voting to determine the legislative priorities that we campaign for every year. So that's where we stand regarding that. But as far as candidates it goes, yeah, we don't necessarily have a position on that front.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Think I saw a question on the chat. Who's advocating for the fully electronic voting machines? We haven't taken a stance on that as well. Electronic voting machines. As I mentioned before, our two priorities right now is focusing more on making sure that paper ballots are option and accessible for those that prefer not to take part on the electronic voting machines. But yeah, I'm not sure what organizations are in favor of electronic voting machines. Any more questions?
I think we're good to go. Otherwise, if we could let Tila.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And we'll follow up in the next few days. We appreciate the presentation. If you want, we recorded it. We can also share that out.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Joe, and it's a pleasure meeting all of you in Long Island. I wish I had come in person, but I was in Albany earlier today, and it would have been a bit of a trek for me to
Yeah,
travel from
yeah.
Albany to Long Island.
Totally understandable. Thanks for taking the time.
Of course,
You're
of
more
course.
than welcome to stay. You don't have to go.
No,
Tila's
definitely.
got-
Let me know your next coalition meeting. Maybe I can make it in person.
Cool. Yeah, it's every second Wednesday.
Nice. Alrighty. make note of that in my calendar.
Great.
All right, thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
All right, Tila, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to Louis. That was a very informative presentation. I wanted to give everyone an update on the court hearing that was held this Monday in Riverhead. It was in regards to the preliminary injunction that the town of the Southampton filed against the Shinnecock Nation's latest economic development project, which is a gas station located on our ancestral territory known as our Westwoods territory. And the hearing, it was a little over 2 hours. It was a long hearing. The judge didn't make any ruling, which was a little bit surprising. We had expected that she might have ruled from the bench. So I don't have a full update to give. But she did say she would rule in about 4 days. So that's probably tomorrow. So I do ask that anyone who is not following the Warriors of the Sunrise Instagram page, if you could follow us on Instagram, it's kind of the most direct way that we can get information out quickly. And I know Long Island Progressive Coalition is really great at amplifying any messages that we put out there. The hearing was a little bit concerning. It was the town's motion, so they were able to spend a majority of the time in the courtroom arguing their case. Unfortunately, most of what the town is arguing is not based in either fact or law, which is extraordinarily concerning to me as an attorney and someone who really seeks to uphold justice and the judicial system. And so I'll just give an example. The town's attorneys, they brought in these like giant poster boards, and they were photos of Westwoods. And so the judge was asking, are any of these photos in any of your filings? Because none of us had ever seen them before. And they said no. So she said, okay, well, when were these photos taken? And so the town's attorneys were like, oh, these were taken in February. And so I guess their easel for the pictures had broken on the way up in the elevator. It was very funny to watch all of it. It was like a failed theater production. But anyway, so the judge asked again, she's like, are you sure these photos were taken in February? And she was kind of like leaning over the bench because they were on the floor and she was having a hard time seeing them. And the town's attorney was like, yes, yes, yes. And she's like, well, I see the wildfires from yesterday in these photos. And so the town's attorneys were like, oh, yeah, these photos were taken yesterday. So they couldn't even tell the truth about when the photos were taken. And that's not even to say the truth about the nation's land tenure and the fact that this is our ancestral birthplace and the fact that the United States government has traced back our genealogy of every single tribal member in our nation having been born from someone who lived at our Westwoods territory. And so the town attorney kept citing this case. It started in 2003. It lasted all the way until 2012. Just to give you some perspective, I graduated high school in 2005. I graduated college in 2010. I graduated law school in 2012. So I kind of like grew up with that case. And I learned, a lot of how to fight back against it. And in 2012, the case was vacated. And it was vacated for lack of subject matter jurisdiction. And when a federal case is vacated, when any case is vacated, you cannot use it for precedential value. It is vacated, it has no weight. And so the town spent probably an hour arguing this vacated case. And so Shinnecock Nation, and furthermore, the appellate court had ruled in December of 2024 that that case couldn't be relied on for any reason. That was already established by the higher court. And so our attorneys, of course, argued, well, you can't use a vacated case as presidential value. And the appellate court has said that you can't use that. And so the judge was like, I don't know about that, which was extremely questionable because, I mean, any law student could tell you that. Nonetheless, like any judge. And then, there was this assertion that Westwoods is residentially zoned as R60 land, which just isn't the case. Our wonderful assembly person, Fred Thiel, started his career out as a Southampton town attorney and dealt with this issue a couple months before I was born in 1987. And the state weighed in and they're like, you cannot zone this land. It's Indian reservation. It's the land of a sovereign nation. State and local zoning has no force and effect. And so that's been established for almost 40 years now. And yet the town's attorneys were arguing, first in their complaint, they argued that they were seeking to enforce zoning. And so the judge said, I saw it at least 37 times in your complaint that you are seeking to enforce zoning. I got to file an affidavit in response showing all of the zoning records. And so in reply, the town said, in their reply brief, they said, even if the town was attempting to assert zoning, which we're not, the judge was like, that left me really confused since it came up at least 37 times in your complaint that you were attempting to use zoning. So I don't know if I don't think the town did any research. I think that they just filed a lawsuit. I just got a response to a FOIL request that I had made to find out how much these attorneys had been paid in just the last couple months. And I was told that they have been paid already $153,000. And they did no research into the zoning of the land. They didn't look at any of the title documents. They didn't look at, anything except for this vacated case for $153,000 of the taxpayers' dollars, which of course they also asked for Shinnecock to pay back to them. They've authorized the town to spend up to $3 million a year in these litigation costs, which they expect us to pay as we struggle to even provide like a minimal standard of nutrition for our children and for our elders. And we live in extraordinarily substandard housing that would shock like your soul and conscious if you saw it. And so it's really just cruel. And so the town was seeking for that day for the judge to rule against us. The judge said she was going to reserve her ruling. She didn't really give too much indication. She did question the weight of the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, who, of course, has the full delegated authority of the United States Congress, who has plenary powers over Indian affairs pursuant to the United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, which is exclusive plenary power delegated to the executive branch. She questioned that, which to me is extraordinary, again, as a attorney and someone who understands federalism and local and state municipal law. It's really really concerning, I think, for all of us. We should be concerned that a town thinks that it can outweigh the United States. And so that's really concerning. But we will know in a couple of days. The judge did indicate that neither party was going to be happy with her ruling. And she did make us agree to a stipulation where we would only perform construction of the gas station between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. So she didn't do what the town had asked to stop us, but we'll know more again on Thursday, and we'll try to get any actions that may be necessary out on Instagram as soon as possible. In the meantime, if you do want to help us, a really great way is to write letters to the editor. Today, the Southampton Press editorial board um, released an endorsement for the special election that's coming up in Southampton on March 18th for the Republican candidate who has been running his campaign on supporting the litigation against Shinnecock. And they attacked, it was, in my view, slander, the Democratic candidate who has been very, very open. And he's a litigator, he's an attorney. He's spent a lot of time reviewing a lot of the town records, and he's been openly campaigning that the lawsuit should be ended immediately and that government to government consultation with the nation should occur. And so he was attacked by the editorial board of 27 East today. So any letters to the editor in support of either Shinnecock Nation or that candidate, his name is John Leonard, would be really appreciated. There's also the East End Star and Newsday are great for any type of letter to the editor. Also, there is a pretty easy way to join the Southampton Town Board meetings on Zoom. They keep it really hidden, the Zoom link, but there's a public portion of every single meeting. I think Susan was talking before about the really organized group who shows up at every meeting. And I was just thinking as she was saying that, that's horrible that they want to take away ballot access. But if Shinnecock had a group that came to every single meeting and just spoke up in support of sovereignty, like how meaningful would that be? And could that potentially change the ways that the town board is viewing this situation? Because, in both fact and law, they're just completely wrong. And then we found out that a couple 100 feet away, the town had authorized another gas station on top of an existing toxic plume. Um, and that was fine, but our gas station, for some reason, isn't fine when we consider ourselves to be stewards of the environment and have taken amazing care of the east end of Long Island for almost 13,000 years. I see a question that the candidates for the special election are Rick Martell. He's a Republican. He lost his seat in the last election to Michael Iacilli, who is a progressive Democrat, as well as Bill Pell, who's also a Democrat. And he is running against John Leonard, who's a Democrat and an attorney and has been a huge ally to the Shinnecock Nation. So please, if you live in the town of Southampton, I know we have a lot of Nassau and Western Suffolk, but if you have friends or family that live out in Southampton, special elections typically have a really low voter turnout. So like every vote really matters in this election. So if you do have friends or family, if you could encourage them to get out and vote, this is really a time when that's definitely needed. And so I had made like notes of things I want to touch about and I can't find them on my phone, but just if you could just, amplify when we do release. We don't know how the judge is going to rule in a couple of days. It could be tomorrow or it could be Friday. And, we probably will appeal whatever ruling comes down, but I think the court of public opinion really matters. And if we have folks who are able to educate themselves about Indigenous sovereignty and what that means, just any type of like repetition of it may somehow sink into the Southampton Town Board because they don't seem to understand what it means and they don't seem to understand how to interact with the Shinnecock Nation as a sovereign government. They think that they can control everything that we do, and it's just not the case. I was really alarmed because the judge had said, I think what needs to happen is we need to do a title search. And the Department of the Interior in January of 2025 notified the town that they had spent 3 years conducting a title search, and that was with surveyors from the Bureau of Land Management. This person in particular who had done the title work has been doing this for over 35 years. He examined every piece of every record available, and came to the conclusion that Shinnecock Nation has unbroken chain of title since time immemorial, that this is sovereign Aboriginal land. And like, these are the experts in federal Indian law. You really only get to be in that office if you're the best and brightest. And for the town and the judge to say, you know, I really don't know, I think we need to do a title search, is really offensive to the fact that the United States and all of their, you know, wisdom and expertise spent years doing a title search and came to the conclusion, and they have the delegated authority pursuant to the United States Constitution to make these determinations for the town to say, I just don't know. I don't know what this is. I don't know what it says. We also had found out that they had appealed to the Interior Board of Indian Appeals, who told the town that they had no standing to bring the appeal, and they somehow they quoted their own language in their own complaint, which the court said that they had no standing to even assert as proof and evidence to the judge. I've never seen anything like it. It's a really alarming abuse of the judicial system, and an attempt to basically bankrupt a tribe that is experiencing poverty like I don't think many of you can even imagine. And then to force us to use a little bit of resources that we do have in such cruel litigation, and then also expect us to pay their attorneys' bills of $30 million a year, is cruelty that I can't even express. I have two little kids, and I'm trying to bring up, you know, just going to the grocery store is a lot. And so, you know, it's really cruel, and we're just trying to get some economic development going so that we can take care of each other. And it's oppression at its finest, and unfortunately it's being led by some of the richest people, you know, in the entire United States and the entire world are supporting this cruelty. So we really need all allies, all eyes on this, and folks to stand up and assert that they respect Indigenous sovereignty. And with that, I want to say a special thank you to Ryan Madden. I know that he's coming up on almost 10 years with the Long Island Progressive Coalition. And he's just been amazing representation of what Indigenous solidarity means. And I just want to wish him well in his next role with New York Renews as the Indigenous Solidarity partner. And just thank you to Long Island Progressive Coalition for all of your support over many, many years, and assistance in amplifying our voice, because it's often so easy that our story is just erased from the narrative, and these misrepresentations of facts and law and just flat out lies. I mean, they couldn't even tell the truth about when a photo was taken. It's you know, it's our civic responsibility to stand up against it. So I do want to answer any questions that anyone might have also. I see a couple of questions. Did the Brookhaven Town Council lady for the 6th Council District attend the hearing? I attended virtually. The only folks that I saw attending in person were two of the Southampton town attorneys, Maria Moore, who is the Democratic supervisor, who was recently endorsed by the Republican Party and then came out as she changed her position from being a moderate Democrat to she now says that she's a conservative Democrat, as well as Cindy McNamara, who's like a MAGA Republican. She's the sole Republican member of the town board. She was sitting front row and center with the biggest smile that you can ever imagine on her face. And our former chairman, Brian Polite, was there in person, but I didn't see anyone else. The town's main objection to the gas station, they claim that they don't theoretically object to the gas station. However, they want to enforce zoning and town code, which of course is the primary mechanism of how you enforce zoning. They want to be able to approve our site plan. They claim that we're not building to the town standards when we have contractors who exceed not only federal, but state and the town's own building codes. Because, like I said, they authorized a gas station almost 400 feet away that led to toxic plumes. So I don't know how much I trust the town's ability to regulate gas stations. They're not very good at it, and we need to protect our sole source aquifer and our natural resources. So we had specified to our engineers that we wanted, only the best, the gold standard. And so they also object. There's a town highway. So the town is actually bringing the lawsuit through their town highway supervisor, and they had objected to a curb cut that we had put. However, again, I did do the title work, and that road is not appropriately titled to the town. They can't claim valid ownership of it. And so it's just a control thing. They say that they're able to regulate our use of the land, which is not how federal Indian law is set up. I mean, and that's true for every single community who lives next to the 574 federally recognized tribes in this country. It's simply not a thing that exists. No town has the right to regulate Indian land. So that's their goal. And also, I do believe that they are able to profit from keeping us in poverty throughout this process of the United States examining title. They found that both the Ogden deed and the Topping deeds were completely invalid, and that those two deeds cover all of the land from the town of Southampton all the way to the town of Brookhaven. So you can imagine they have a big problem on their hands. That's stolen land they have no valid title to. So they're on very shaky legal ground. And I don't believe that they ever wanted those truths to be exposed. I see another question. How can we go about writing letters to the editor? Can it please be shared in the chat the name of the candidate in the special election? Yes, I'll put his name in, John Leonard. And I can send to Joe information about how to submit a letter to the editor, to both the Southampton Press, which is also known as 27 East, as well as Newsday. That's a really influential one. And I see, Susan, you have a question.
Yes, I do. Forgive me for being suspicious, but I always think of follow the money. The question in my mind is that they want to get this land in Westwoods for a reason. And knowing how the land around you is overdeveloped by all these rich people, my guess would be that there's some developer who has their eye on this land, which is why they don't want you to have it for gas station. Have you checked into if there were any big contributions made to any of the Southampton town council members by any developers? Because that might lead you to some motivation as to why they're doing this. I mean, it's your land. It's clear that it's your land. Why are they so hungry to get this land? There's more to it, I think, than meets the eye. And I think it has something to do with money. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. We haven't done that. However, I've been a part of multiple meetings where the town of Southampton has attempted to purchase Westwoods from us. And of course, like like you can't get more ancestral than this. Literally every single one of us derived from this place. Like this is our Aboriginal territory. And so of course we would never sell it to the town of Southampton for any price. And yet the town's relentless. It's probably every, I don't know, I was going to say every 2 years, but probably every year the town calls us into town hall and they attempt to get us to sell Westwoods. And they bring up, they say, we know how poor you are and we could give you money. And we say, no, you cannot buy what little land we have left. We will never sell it. And so the town says to me, well, you're young and you don't understand the value of this land. You don't understand how much money we would give you, and you could support your children and you could support your elders and you wouldn't have to worry. And I said, no, it's you that doesn't understand that we will never sell this land to you. And so, in some of the more recent meetings, it came out that the town was looking to use Westwoods to build affordable housing. And so, there's this big problem out in the Hamptons called the Trade Parade. And it's because contractors are coming from Western Long Island to service all these rich people, their mansions and everything. And it's gotten to the point where, like, your average, like, small kind of like bungalow, very modest home in Hampton Bays is on the market for over like $1.2 million. I mean, the closest affordable place that you could live really is Riverhead. And even there, like the values of homes has like skyrocketed. So anyway, so the town is looking at our land to build affordable housing on. It's one of the largest undeveloped pieces of land. And that was the latest proposal that was made to us. And they say, oh, don't worry, we'll reserve 10% of the units for Shinnecock members. It's very insulting. But yes, if we could have all of your support, and we'll let you know through Warriors and LIPC, of course, will amplify any direct calls to action. And we'll, do a better job of letting everyone know when the upcoming town board meetings are. And I'll distribute that information of exactly how to submit the letters to the editor, because believe it or not, they do go a long way. They shape the public discourse in the town, especially 27 East. And this latest editorial about this special election, I was really shocked, because we had met with the editor of the local paper. His name is Joe Shaw, and he really let us know. He let us know that historically, the town had been against us, and the paper has been against us. But under his leadership, he really came full circle and was a supporter of the nation. But that was proven to be untrue today with this editorial board saying that the town has to litigate against us. There's other ways to resolve disputes that don't involve this type of cruel litigation. It's nothing short of like litigation abuse. And I don't think it's the right way to mediate the problem. We would be more than happy to share all of the findings of the United States and share all of the title work that we did. It was extensive. I mean, it took me years to do. And after I spent those years doing it, it took the United States another 3 years to verify and fill in some of the gaps that I had. I have searched titles for maybe 11 years, but it took a surveyor who's been doing this for 35 years to fill in some of the missing pieces. And all of that was done. It was a very extensive process. And for the town to write that off or come to the conclusion, oh, maybe we we might need to do a title search. Like, yeah, we already did a title search and we've already figured this out. And so it's just really at this point, a thing that we all need to kind of get together and speak up against.
I just want to add one. It might have to do also with the fact that you're a young woman. I mean, the disrespect that they're showing is not only, because of the nation and so on. It's also their attitude towards young women. And I'm thinking that they're showing their attitude by the way that they are treating you. It's terrible.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. It is terrible what they're doing, and it seems just constantly having to point that out. So thank you, Tila, for coming up with this update. I'm hoping it'll be a good finding, tomorrow or Friday. And, of course, like you said, we're always happy to help support and push some actions out. And, I think it's a good segue because we just started a writers club to do letters to the editor. So anyone who's interested in that, this will be a good one to do. So yeah, send us the information about, who to send it to and maybe a copy of the, what is the endorsement they put out for this guy, and just to let people know, Long Island Progressive Coalition is an affiliate of the Working Families Party. The Working Families Party did endorse Leonard in this race, so he is the candidate we would want to support because of his stances. So just to throw that out there.
Actually, a
Yeah.
question. Tella, if you do end up appealing, where would you be appealing to?
That would be the New York Appellate Court, which is located in Brooklyn, the Second Division. We're in the Supreme Court right now, which is the trial court.
Okay. I'm wondering if, so I work for a law firm in the city, and I could ask them, if it comes to you having to do the appeal, I could ask if we could jump on pro bono if you need any assistance.
I'll pass that on to tribal leadership if Joe could help us exchange information.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have to check and see if that's something we could take on, but if it comes to that, we're right next to Brooklyn, we're in the city. So I'd love to help.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tila.
Yeah. We will, we'll make a copy of this recording and make sure you get it so you can share it out as well. All
Thank
right.
you so much, Joe.
And, my pleasure. Tila and I have worked together for years now. It's everything from diaper drives to litigation. So, and we're gonna